Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road2College. I'm just waiting for a few more people to come in through the waiting room. Thanks for showing up at noon. At least it's noon. I'm on the East Coast time. Could be morning if you're West Coast. But actually, while we're waiting for a few more people to come in from the waiting room, if you could put in the chat where you are Zooming from and what year in high school your student is in. I think most people either have and we can use the phrase now, rising junior or rising senior. And whether you have rising junior or senior, have you done any work yet on building a college list, on researching colleges, on maybe visiting colleges? It'd just be nice to hear what stage people are at before we get started. Great. Oh, so I love to see a lot of like rising juniors, because that means you guys are, I would call you ahead of the curve, because you have a good amount of time to learn what I'm going to talk about today and really implement it. But there's still time for those rising seniors as well. So I'm glad you're here. We always encourage people to start as early as possible. It's the hardest thing for us to kind of get people to recognize that if you start this early, you'll be better off. But I'm glad everybody is here today. Okay, good. Lots of people from all over the country: Florida, Massachusetts, Chicago. Thank you for showing up. Okay, so I'm going to really try and keep this within an hour because it's the middle of the day. These are technically meetings as opposed to webinars, and I only tell you that because you can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. It's perfectly fine. If you want to just type out your question, please put it into chat. I will glance over, see what people are asking. And this is recorded. We will send the recording tomorrow. Anybody who wants to put themselves on video, it's always nice to see a face out there. So that's up to you, but we like to get to know people, even if it's just with see their face and their name. I think that's it. I will get started sharing my screen. Okay. Can someone just give me a thumbs up? Let me know that you can see my screen properly. Or if you want to put it in the chat, say yes, that'd be great. Thank you. Thank you for your video people. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about merit scholarships, how you search for them, how you build a balanced list. It's all interrelated, and it's actually interrelated to how you pay for college. But let's see. So that's really the agenda that I just talked about. So I always try and start from this point of view, why are we looking for colleges that offer merit scholarships? Well, of course, to have your student be recognized is always a nice thing, but really this has become so much more important these days because the cost of college is, let's be honest, a little crazy. So for most families who aren't going to receive need-based aid, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, the best way for you to reduce the cost of college is to find a college that's going to offer your student merit scholarships money. I know there's, let me go through these buckets and I'll talk a little bit about private scholarships versus merit scholarships. There's really three major ways that parents and families can pay for college these days. The first is family contribution, meaning hopefully you've been able to save, throughout the 18 years. Some people have started later, but whatever it is, hopefully there's some contribution that's going to come from savings. Some families figure out, a way to at least can also contribute from cash flowing their situation. It may not cover everything, but They can still contribute from their current income as your student goes to college. And there possibly could be, it didn't really include it here, maybe there's, relatives or grandparent that's also contributing. But basically, that's, a bucket that's coming from the family. It's probably been, hopefully, built up over a few years. The next source of money is this category of free money. And free money can come from a few different places. What we're going to talk about today, which I've highlighted, is I'm going to touch a little bit on financial aid, but that's quite honestly a topic unto itself. But some families that qualify for need-based aid are going to get money from financial aid. And then the topic we're really going to focus on is merit scholarships. And then there is private scholarships. So why don't we focus on private scholarships? We can, and at some point in the journey or the process, families should, focus on private scholarships. I just don't think it gives you the best bang for the buck, and I should say bang for your time. It's this whole process is time consuming, but private scholarships are even more time consuming. And there's a saying that we have that says the best scholarship your student's going to get, or the scholarship that's going to offer the most money, is the scholarship from the college itself. So private scholarships tend to be smaller. They tend to be in the $500 to maybe $2,000 range. So that just means that your student is chasing a lot of smaller opportunities. Not that it can't work. It's just harder to piece it together. The other thing about private scholarships is it's usually, most of these private scholarships are not renewable. So whatever your student does to get private scholarship money one year, they're going to have to continue to do it in subsequent years to refill that source of funding. So I am not poo-pooing it. I just don't view it as the place to put your most energy now. It's really, I suggest that students, once they have applied to schools that they are going to potentially get merit scholarship money from, they should focus on private scholarships at just a different point in the process. So that's just my opinion about it. And then the last category is, of course, borrowed money for families right now who have that incoming freshman. We're doing a lot of webinars and emails related about student loans, about federal loans, about how you search for private loans. And of course, we want to avoid you having to go to that bucket as much as possible. But for some families, it's unavoidable. And at that point, then you just also want to try and minimize as much as you need to borrow. So those are really the three, major areas that your student's going to get money from, or you as a family are. And of course, we want to maximize as much as we can in merit scholarships, because it's going to reduce potentially having to borrow money, or in some case, it will eliminate the need for borrowing money. Okay. So in the search for merit scholarships, right, it's all coming, as I mentioned before, the best scholarship your student's going to get is from the college itself. So if that's the case, then the next most important thing is the college list. The schools that your students apply to is going to be critical. And that's why we focus so much on the building a strong college list. It turns out, if you think about it, that college list obviously ultimately determines your final cost of college, right? Because your student's only going to be accepted to the colleges they apply to. And then by default, when you have to decide where they're going to attend college, that it's only going to be an even smaller subset of the schools that they apply to. And that's ultimately going to determine, what college costs for your family. Obviously, whatever schools are on the list are the schools they're going to be accepted to. And then the last point, and as families of rising juniors, you might not realize this yet, as families of rising seniors, you're starting to feel this, is the colleges on your students' list also going to determine how much work it's going to take your student to get through applications. Of course, there is the Common App, which has what they call, the personal statement, which is one essay. But as you kind of get into all of these colleges, you realize that colleges, in addition to the the Common App essay, also have supplemental essays, which are sometimes even more important than the Common App. And then, as I'm going to talk about, for some of these merit scholarships, there are now additional applications which come with additional essays. So again, it's not bad. It's just you need to recognize how much work this might be. That's why we encourage your families and students to be working, particularly your rising senior students, to be working now over the summer before senior year starts, to just kind of compile all the essays you might have to write, understand the deadlines, and just be prepared, because the fall of senior year, really, I'd say August through October, November, it can be very overwhelming and busy for rising seniors. Okay. So somebody asks, is there a clearinghouse of information which colleges give the most merit aid for non-need-based family? Great question. I wish there was. If there was, this would be like a 10-minute presentation, and I'd just send you the link. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And that's actually why we started pulling together a lot of this information years ago, because there should be a clearinghouse, but colleges and this whole college industry, you have to call it, just kind of works on its own. Every college is kind of like it is their own business. They do things the way they want to do it, and there's not always standardization across all of these colleges. So there isn't a clearinghouse, but it's a great idea. You'd have to get all the colleges to buy into it, which is another issue. But what we're going to talk about today helps you kind of do the research a little bit more efficiently. I get daily emails from Appley and Bold.com. Are these sites legit for scholarships? That's a great question. And before I answer, I'm just curious. I'm going to throw it out to the audience or whoever's here today. Does anybody know what the site Appley is? And you can unmute yourself if you want to put it in chat. I'm just curious if people really know who are behind these sites. Okay. So, and this actually kind of relates to stuff we'll talk a little bit about today. So, well, first of all, I'll start more easily with bold.org. Bold.org is its own entity. It is focused purely on private scholarships. There is a whole industry around private scholarships because private scholarships capture students and sometimes parents' email addresses and other information about the student. And quite honestly, that information is sold, not in a bad way, but it's sold to financial services company. It's sold to colleges. So it's really just bold.org in its most basic sense is a website that is a lead generation website. They're just using scholarships as their form of gathering leads, and then they are selling it to organizations. Some of them, private companies, and some of them the colleges. So that's what bold.org is. Appley is actually a front-end website to a company called EAB. I'm pretty sure it's EAB, but there's two main big players in the enrollment management industry. One is called EAB. I used to have a slide about this, and one's called RNL, Ruffalo, Noel, Levitz. And these companies do strategic consulting to the colleges. They help come up with the algorithms and the models that colleges use when they offer merit scholarships, and we'll talk about that again in a little bit. And what some of them have now moved into, so they used to kind of just be consulting companies, but big time consulting companies. They've also now moved into lead generation. So they are also capturing lead information that they are now incorporating with their consulting advice and working with colleges. So they're working with colleges and saying, let's figure out the students who you should attract. Let's figure out how much money you should offer them. Let's figure out your whole funnel about, how you're going to market to them. And in addition, hey, we've got leads that we're going to market or offer to you as well, because those leads now fit all of the profile information that we just recommended that you should go after. Is that bad? I don't know. It's business, but but just that's really what that website is. It's lead generation, again, for the colleges. Okay, so good questions. Glad you guys are at least like, now you can kind of be more aware. It's an industry, and it's all these players who are involved. Okay, so what is merit aid? People call it merit scholarships. I mean, on one level, they are truly scholarships. Some schools, are much more selective in how they give out their money. Other schools might be less selective, and in some ways you might look at it as just a tuition discount from those schools. I think it's the full range. And again, it's to the business of college. There's been a lot of talk about, why do colleges give these merit scholarships, especially if they're just kind of giving it as a tuition discount? Should they just lower their price? Like, it feels like it's just they're throwing out discounts all the time. What if they just, at the end of the day, lowered their price? And it's all about perception. So I can't remember which school recently, but I read a case study where a school did a few years back just decide to do what they call a tuition reset, and they just lowered their tuition for everybody. And it was a perception, and they actually, even though financially everybody who applied to that school was going to be better off, the school didn't do better in terms of enrollment and number of applications that came through, because people perceived that that school didn't have a quality education because they had reset their tuition. So instead, colleges kind of maintain this process of, they have like basically a retail price, and then for some students they discount it through merit scholarships, and the process just kind of continues. But what you do need to know about merit scholarships is, and it is not based on any sort of financial need. So, you don't have to show that you have or a certain income level. For some schools, you may not even have to fill out any financial aid forms. Usually, colleges are using merit scholarships or merit aid to attract a stronger student to their college. So they're looking at a student, if you've been doing research and you look at, and you can see that, like, there's the average SAT, or there's a 75th percentile test score, and there's a GPA. So colleges want to use this money to kind of say to the stronger students, hey, I know you might have other opportunities of where you can go to college, but we'd love you to come here, and we're going to offer you this money as an incentive, and you'll also help us because you'll raise the academic profile at our school. So they're definitely using the money strategically. Something to keep in mind is that merit money, think about it, it's the college's personal money. So they can decide how they want to use it, however they want. And they are using it, in strategic ways, whether it's to attract a stronger academic student. It could be that they have a new program that they're launching. Maybe I'm making this up, in data science. So they want to attract students who are going to enroll in that program. So they have certain institutional priorities, and they're usually using the merit scholarship money to attract a student that's going to improve their institutional priorities. Another important thing to know about merit scholarships, and this kind of relates to what I mentioned about private scholarships, is that if your student is offered merit scholarships from a college, it is generally renewable year after year. So they offered it as an incoming freshman. That money they will receive sophomore, junior, senior year. So that's good. That kind of obviously goes against the comments I made about private scholarships, where every year you have to kind of do the same process. Here, you do it one time. That's why it's so important that parents know about it as part of the admissions process, because that's the best time to get these merit scholarships, when they're incoming freshmen. And then if your student is awarded merit scholarships, and we talk about this later in the year, it's just important to know that most of the merit scholarships come with some sort of a GPA requirement at the college. Sometimes it's pretty lenient. It's an easy GPA requirement. It could be a 3.0. Other times it could be higher and harder, like a 3.5. And quite honestly, the colleges use that to weed out some students who might not, get merit scholarships later on in their years because they are not keeping up with the GPA requirement. So again, that's kind of a little later in the process when your student has gotten merit scholarships. One of the things to do as part of the decision process is making sure that you feel comfortable that they can make whatever the GPA requirement is each year. Because the worst thing to happen, and I see it all the time, and we get emails about it all the time, is you and your student made this decision about a college that they were going to attend, and that college was affordable because of the merit aid that the school was offering. And then if that student loses the merit aid because maybe they didn't meet the GPA requirement, all of a sudden that affordable school becomes unaffordable. And it's much harder in midstream, although it's possible, your student could transfer. It just causes another host of issues if that school becomes unaffordable like a year or two in. Okay. So let's talk about merit scholarships. These buckets aren't anything formal. They're just kind of a way that I've created, categories to talk about merit scholarships over the years, but I find it's helpful. So, and I'm gonna give you examples of these 3 different types of merit scholarships. The first are automatic. So what that means is there's nothing additional your student has to do. Hopefully you've researched ahead of time, so you know that particular college, is offering money, and we'll show you how. But basically, your student just has to send in their application, and the college is looking at every application that comes through to potentially see, is it a student that they want to offer merit to? So that's great and easy. The harder part is doing the research to make sure that you know that ahead of time. The second is competitive, and it's kind of what the name implies. Your student will most likely have to do something in addition to sending in their regular application. There could be a separate application for these merit scholarships. It could be a separate essay. It could be a different deadline. And again, I'll give you some examples. And so this is part of the research that you need to do ahead of time, because you don't want to miss any of the deadlines. And the last is related to students who might have a particular talent, whether it's music, theater, dance, and those types of merit scholarships usually involve having to set up an audition or send in a portfolio. And the reason why this is obviously a smaller group of students, students with these particular talents. But if your student is applying to a school where they're offering these merit scholarships, you usually want to be aware of deadlines. There's usually a different deadline for potentially sending in a portfolio, a different deadline for scheduling an audition. So again, as I highlighted at the bottom, it's really important to keep track of all of these deadlines. It's not just the deadline of when the application it's due. It could be, in the case of talent, when the deadline when there is setting up an appointment or sending in the portfolio. And some of these deadlines are before, like the college's main deadline, and some of them are after, because the selection process might actually kick off after the student has sent in their main application. So let me just take a quick drink. So here's an example of a school that offers automatic merit scholarships. It is Miami University in Ohio. And what you tend to see with the colleges, not every college that offers merit scholarship, but if I could rate the colleges like from a transparency level, the colleges that I think are great are the ones that provide automatic merit scholarships, and they have these chart or a table on their website. Because they're just kind of laying out everything for you, and you don't have to, do as much digging and research. So I show the example here of Miami University starting at the bottom right in 2020, just to kind of show you how things have shifted. Obviously, 2020 this chart was right before the pandemic. It was at a time when most colleges were test required, and merit scholarships were offered by a combination of a certain test score that you needed to receive and a certain GPA. And so that was in 2020. You could see their top level. You had to have an ACT of 33 or an SAT of 1450 or above. You had to have a GPA of 3.5, and you would get either somewhere between a half and full tuition of $32,000 to $64,000. So, if your student was in that level, I mean, this becomes a very attractive school if they can get that much money. And then, as you can see, it shifts from 2021 to 2020. I skipped a few years, 2024, and then this is the most recent 2025. Obviously, the pendulum swung. Most schools now are test optional, although there's definitely a certain group of colleges that are going back to test required. But you can see as they moved to test optional, they only listed what the GPA was that they required. And you can see that from 2021 to 2024, the GPA number changed. And so this is what consultants like EAB, who I mentioned, or enrollment management consultants work with colleges. They look at the type of student that is coming to the school, the type of student that they want to attract, and they figure out through analytical modeling how much money we need to offer that student at different GPA levels to make it attractive for them to come to us. I mean, to be really blunt, obviously a student that is maybe a 3.5 or even obviously below 3.5 might not have as many options, so they feel like Miami University feels I don't need to offer them money to come here because if it's a supply and demand issue. The students that are academically stronger are going to have more options of who is going to want them and options of where they can apply. So the college is going to need to offer them more money to make coming to Miami University more attractive. And so you can see how the GPA number has changed over time. It got higher. And you can see, at least from 2021 to 2024, the dollar amounts that they were offering also shifted. And this is just an example. The most well-known college that does this is Alabama. They just, and they've been very successful at this strategy of particularly offering merit scholarships to out-of-state students. And they've really increased their profile, increased their academic standing in the type of student that goes to University of Alabama. And, is this bad? I don't know. There are pros and cons. I think the con is it has made the process overwhelming and much more complicated. The pro is, for example, University of Alabama, they've been able to diversify the students that enroll with them. They've got, a broader range of students, and they've been able to satisfy institutional priorities of attracting students from different geographic locations. So, on that end, it's been successful. The other thing I wanted to point out, and I kind of copied this from Miami University, is to make you aware of the GPA numbers that are used. Miami University makes it clear that they are using a weighted GPA. So, they include that in the title. And then they even give you a link about how to recalculate your GPA. This is a little unusual. Most of the colleges use unweighted GPA. And so, and they're usually using unweighted GPA of your students' core classes. Sometimes some high schools include that information on the student's transcript. Sometimes they don't. So I just want to make you aware, because I've had the situation where a student, it was a family, thought they were looking at these charts. They applied to colleges. They thought that they were going to be offered the top level in terms of merit scholarship, and they were using their daughter's weighted GPA instead of the unweighted GPA, which was what was on the chart. The students still got money, but they didn't get the money that they had expected that they would receive because they were using the wrong calculation. So just want to highlight that as something to be aware of. Let's see, any questions? Oh, good question. Can you receive merit aid if you also qualify for need-based aid? Yes, you can. I mean, that is like the if you can find that type of a college, it's the best combination of a college that's going to offer need-based aid and offer merit aid. There tend to be fewer of them. The colleges tend to be on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Colleges that only offer need-based aid and no merit are usually highly selective colleges. They don't, because again, think of it as this is the college's private money and they're deciding how to use it in the way that they think is most important for their institution. So more selective colleges, they don't have a problem attracting students or the type of student they want. And so the money that they're using is going to go towards families that have financial need. And that's why they don't offer any merit scholarships. They're just offering need-based aid. On the other end, there are some colleges, and I'll show you some, that don't offer any need-based aid and only offer merit scholarships because they're trying to attract a certain type of student. They're trying to kind of like lift the profile of the college. And then there are some in the middle. They're just fewer of them. But yes, so your answer is you can definitely qualify and get need-based aid and also receive merit scholarships. So for anybody who's like asking about how to convert different GPA averages to the 4.0, because there are different ways that high schools are still calculating the GPAs. Two things: I would either reach out to the guidance counselor at the school and ask them for help, or also I would just Google it. There are a lot of calculators that help you, translate whatever this is a GPA of 108. And convert it to the more standard GPA number. So definitely Google it. There are calculators out there. Okay, another good question. I'll answer this, then I'm going to continue on. Do colleges offer more or less merit money if you apply early decisions? I've heard both could happen. You're absolutely right. Both can happen. So early decision means that your student is applying and they are committing that if the college accepts them, they are going to go to that particular college and they're going to take out or remove any applications they've sent to other colleges. So it's a strong commitment that your student wants to go to that school, and if they accept him, basically you're done. So some colleges still offer merit scholarships to students who apply early decision, and some do not. And I wish, going back to the comment of is there a clearinghouse, I wish that there was a clearinghouse. I wish that colleges were transparent about what their policies are. Sometimes we don't know if they're going to offer a merit scholarship until after the fact. We can't, so they might change it from year to year in terms of early decision. But think about it from their standpoint. Think about college as a business. If you have somebody who's applying to you and they are raising their hand and they are saying, regardless of how much money you're going to offer me, I'm committing, because I'm signing this form, to attend your college because I'm applying early decision. Why would the college still offer them money? Because wouldn't the college want to save their money to use it to the other students who aren't making that commitment, where they're going to have to be, where things are going to be more competitive later on in the process? There are still colleges that will offer students merit scholarship money. I just can't say with any sort of guarantee or confidence that which colleges are going to do that and which won't in the early decision process. So my advice on anybody who's their student wants to apply early decision, which is a very strong tactic to use that can help potentially to get your student into certain colleges, that you run the net price calculators. Of course, there's the caveat that the net price calculators aren't always completely accurate, but what I've found is that colleges that offer early decision tend to be more selective colleges, tend to be more competitive colleges. Their net price calculators tend to be more accurate. There's no guarantee, but absolutely run the net price calculator. Make sure that you are comfortable maybe within like a $10,000 range of whatever the number is that you get on the net price calculator. And the reason why I say 10,000 is, it could still be accurate, the net price calculated, but over 4 years, you might see that tuition increase $10,000. So kind of like, make sure that you're looking at not just the first year cost of college, but the 4 years cost of college. And in some schools, and it can't hurt, you could actually contact the financial aid office and say, can you give me a pre-read on what the estimate is going to be for what the cost of college is going to be if my student applies early decision. Again, I can't give you guarantees about how every school operates, but I would recommend that you try all of these things in the research process, and particularly if your student's applying early decision. Okay, let me move on. So here's competitive merit scholarship. I just want to point these schools out for an important reason. Not every school is like this, but there are some. The first example on the left is from USC, University of Southern California. They have different deadlines if your student wants to apply merit scholarship versus if your student wants to apply regular decision. So their deadline for merit scholarships is now November 1st, which is part of their early action round. And so if your student wants to apply if your student wants to be considered for merit scholarships, they have to apply early action. The regular decision for USC is December 1st. Your student can apply December 1st, but they will not be considered for merit scholarships. So this is where looking at the fine print, understanding the deadlines are so important. And the same thing for the example on the right is from BU. Their deadline for merit scholarship is November 1st. Just important to know what all these deadlines are. I will give you an opposite example, is that some schools won't tell you that your student is eligible for merit scholarships until after they send in the application. You'll be able to, they may actually have that information on their website. You'll be able to tell from some of the research tools I'm going to show you that the school offers merit scholarships, but you might not know that your student is eligible for the merit scholarships until after they apply. So some schools wait until they see what students apply. Then they, as part of their review process, they're like, we like the student, most likely the student is going to get in, and we'd also like them to apply to certain additional scholarships at the college. And in that case, the college will reach out to your student. They will sometimes say, we need you to fill out this additional application. We need you to write some additional essays. That can sometimes happen in the January timeframe when like students think, oh, I finished everything, I sent in all the applications, and some students, rightfully so, might feel a little burnt out, and they're like, should I continue doing these? Personally, of course, I'd say take every opportunity that a college offers you. If they're asking you to apply to additional merit scholarships, even if it means writing some essays, I would do it. But that's a challenge that you might have to deal with your student come January. But you've got a lot of time between now and then, but just kind of giving you some heads up. Okay. So I just want to go over this information before we, again, kind of look at some tools to look for colleges for merit scholarship. I think it's really important to know your numbers. And this goes back to the question about, am I going to receive need-based aid or not? So the important numbers for families to understand in this process are COA, which is cost of attendance, which is like kind of the retail price of the college. There's SAI, your student aid index, and that is what is calculated when you fill out the FAFSA. You can go to the government website. I don't know the exact URL now, but if you Google government estimator or government student aid index estimator, it will give you a link to the federal website. The federal government has their own estimator, and fill it out, and you will get a sense of what your SAI is. Nobody likes what their SAI is, because SAI weighs really heavily. It uses your income as like over 50% of the estimation. But that's like a whole nother session to talk about. But it's good to know what your SAI is. And then your SAI is going to determine whether or not your family has financial need. And this is going to vary at each college because family need is going to be based on subtracting your SAI from the college's cost of attendance. Your SAI is static. It's going to stay the same regardless of what college you go to. There's a minor caveat to that. But cost of attendance varies, right, based on the colleges that you're looking at. So let me go with these examples below quickly. In the first example, a family has an SAI of $30,000. At the first college you're looking at, the cost of attendance is $50,000. So in that case, their need is $20,000. And so they would be, so if the college was going to offer them any need-based money, it would be to cover the $20,000 that the college has determined that family has in need. At the next college, the cost of attendance is $80,000. That family has the same SAI, but now their need is much bigger because the cost of attendance at that school is much higher. So this is why, your family need might vary. This is why at some school you actually might not have any need, and then at other school you do. It's all going to depend on kind of where your SAI falls and the type of schools that your student is looking at. If I go to the example on the right, here's a family, and I picked an SAI purposely of $90,000 because most schools have a cost of attendance that's less than $90,000, although there's crazy a few that are in that $90,000 to $100,000 range right now. But at $90,000, that means that at almost every school, you're not going to have any need. You're not going to have any financial need because, right, your cost of attendance minus your SAI is not going to show that you have need. So that's why it's important for families to understand what their SAI is, because it tells you kind of what path you need to go down. If you've got an SAI that's high, 90,000 or above, there's not going to be any school that's going to give you need-based aid. If you have an SAI sometimes between that 30 to 50,000, I should say anything below 50,000, there are at some colleges you might have need, and at other colleges you might not have need. So that's why it's important to know that number. Okay, and then the next number to know is your family budget. So the numbers I just talked to you about, you kind of can't change that much. Cost of attendance is whatever the college sets. Your student aid index, you might be able to change a little bit, but you're only going to be able to change that like earlier in the process, and that's like another conversation. If you see those ads that say, we will help you reduce your EFC or your SAI, I think that 90% of it is bogus, because the only way, the two main contributors to your SAI are your income and your savings. So there's at your income, and your income contributes 50% of your SAI. So unless they're going to change your income and make it lower, because a lower SAI is a lower income is going to lower your SAI, then they can't really impact your SAI or your EFC that much. They can make some tweaks about your savings, about which account it's in, and that might make a difference, but it's not going to make the tremendous difference that some of those ads make you feel like you'll walk away with. But that's just a side comment I'm putting out there. The other important number to know is your family budget. Nobody can tell you what that should or can be. You've got to decide this. And I give the quick example of a mother who once shared her story. She had 4 kids. Her family had a high income. So at the time it was an EFC, but their EFC was probably over 100,000, but she knew she had 4 kids to put through college. And she did not want to spend more than $35,000 a year for each student, even though her SAI said she could pay, for any college out there. And so she kept her budget in mind. And so she kept looking for colleges that could offer her student merit scholarship. And she kept looking for colleges where the cost of attendance was just lower and had a lower starting point. I think she ended up being able to find a college for $40,000, but that just shows you how important it is to know, how much you are budgeting to spend. It doesn't mean that you're going to find that perfect college at the budget that you want to spend, but I think it's an important number to kind of keep in mind. I've found that families that kind of go into the process knowing how much that, kind of what their top line is that they're willing to spend, they generally get better outcomes. And when I mean by better outcomes, it doesn't mean that they always find a college that is exactly at the budget that they're willing to spend, but they usually come in much closer. So again, I saw a mother write that she ended up having to spend $7,000 or $8,000 more than what their budget is. Again, it's more than the budget, but that is much better than so many other stories where people don't kind of think about these numbers ahead of time, and they come to the end of the process and they are faced with the options of colleges that are 30, 40, 50,000 more than that they were expecting or able to spend, and that's per year. And those are the families that end up having to make hard decisions and usually are going through private loans. Okay, but anyhow, this quick example in this family, the SAI is 90,000. They're not going to get need at any school. They have a budget of 45,000, so it means that they need to look for schools that either are going to offer their student merit or schools that just have a lower cost of attendance to begin with. So in the first example, you can see, okay, at the first school, they're able to find a cost of attendance of 40,000. It's probably going to be some sort of a state school. And in that case, it's below her budget. And they're probably going to be asked to pay the full cost of attendance. And, that worked out. In the second example, the cost of attendance is 80,000. And in that case, they're willing to pay 45,000. This school was able to offer 25,000 in merit. And then what's left, the family is going to have to decide if they're going to finance it with loans. But at least they were able to cover a big chunk of the gap between what their budget was and what the college was going to charge them, because they've found a school that can offer their student merit. Okay, I'm going to skip probably a few slides here to just go to more of some tools and answer questions. So here are some tips, right? Know your numbers, know your SAI, know your family budget. Know if you as a family have to look for schools that are only going to offer merit scholarships, or maybe you might fall into some schools where because of your SAI, you are eligible for need, and you also have to see that school offers need. You might have heard this a lot, cast a wide net. I think my advice why we say this is because there are a lot of schools out there that you just may not recognize the name of, or you've never heard of. Of course, we're all familiar with maybe like the top 20 because they're in the news so often. But I see a journey in this process with both the students and the parents. At the beginning, maybe both have a very fixed idea of the type of schools that the student wants to go to. They have particular names of schools that they want to research. And then as they go through the process, they learn more. They might have successes and failures. And at the end, they're at a school that was maybe not on the list originally, or a school that they had never heard of. But as they research more, they found out that it just met more of the requirements, but they didn't know about it at the beginning. And so that's why I say start with a wide net. Don't have preconceived notions of particular names of schools. That's a lot of things that trips up students as they want to go to. Usually it's a large size school. They want to go to a Big Ten state school. Research those schools, but don't stick in that category. And I'm going to show you, I particularly prefer that you have as few requirements as possible when you start the search. See what the results come back and start looking at those results, and then put more filters on it. Always include your state school in your searches and applying. Hopefully, depending on your state, it's may end up being somewhat reasonable. We call this number 6 is a leverage school. So if this is a little bit more sophisticated, but I think it's important to think about. There are some schools that are very competitive with what they call their peer schools or their peer institutions. So and this becomes helpful kind of later on in the process. If your student has applied to a group of schools that might be more competitive with each other, and they got an offer from one school, but your student wants to go to the other school, you can, if you show that offer to the school that maybe didn't give as good as an offer, it just gives you more leverage in the process later on when you have all of your financial aid offers or all your merit scholarship offers and you're comparing them. It's good to have a few schools where you know your student is going to get a merit scholarship from, merit money, and then you can kind of leverage it against another school where maybe they didn't give you as much merit, and then this is all part of what is called the appeals process. You can appeal your need-based aid and you can appeal your merit scholarship. Okay, I'm going to show you a tool. It's actually called Insights. It's a tool we created. Again, going back to the question about a clearinghouse, there isn't one clearinghouse, but there's different sources of data. And what we did in this tool is pull the data sources all together in one spot, so to make it easier to do the research. So the data comes from, the data that we use come from three sources. Most of the data comes from something called the Common Data Set. Just kind of curious, have people heard of the phrase common data set? Have they looked at any common data sets? If you can put it in chat, I'd be curious how familiar people are with that. Okay, yes and no. So if you aren't familiar with a common data set, just take any college that you're interested in. I'm just using this as an example, and go to Google and say Tulane Common Data Set. It's going to show you, it's going to, usually the colleges list like maybe the last 10 years of their common data set. It's also usually in a PDF form or an Excel file, and it's a host of data on their admissions, on their financial aid, on their majors, and it just breaks down in more detail a lot of the data that you're going to want to maybe find, the colleges that are best for your students. So there isn't one place that has all that data together. So you can, again, go to individual colleges and find it, but there's not one site where you can have access to all of that common data set information and do what I call a reverse lookup. So that's what we built when we created Insights, is we pulled the common data set from all of the colleges. We do not have every field. We have the pieces of data that we find are most valuable to help people do the search, and I'll show you. And now you don't have to go to each school's website to find their common data set. You can if you want, maybe, but at least you can start with our tool and you can say, show me colleges that meet this criteria, and we're kind of using the common data set, and so it makes the search easier. We also pull information from the government. Their data is called IPEDS. That's a, yes, because someone said, but going to each school is tedious. It is tedious. IPEDS is the data that's on a website called College Navigator, which is the government's website. Again, it's good. I would definitely check it out. The issue with IPEDS is that the data tends to have a little bit of a more of a time lag to it, because usually it's 18 months old. And it's just, you can use it off of the College Navigator website, but if you wanted to use the raw government data, you'd have to be downloading data sets. So it's just harder to manipulate. And the third piece of data is what we call crowdsourced data. And this is our own data that we have collected over the years. And this is parents or families sharing back the actual results that they got from colleges. So which colleges gave them money, how much money, and then we ask information about that student. So what was your GPA? What was your test score? Did you submit your test score? What state are you from? And what your family's SAI is. So you have a little sense of what the family's like income is. And College Insights uses all of this information to let you search. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go, let me show you Insights. Oops, let me log out. Let's see, is this still sharing, or do I have to reshare it? Sometimes Here, I'll just reshare it just to be safe. Okay, can you see a website called Insights? Okay, oops, sorry, where's my chat? Okay, so if you go to, I'll put it in, it's insights.road2college. You can see what I'm seeing, and you can create a free account. Oops, sorry, wait, I pressed the wrong thing. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, so you can log in. And if you're logging in for the first time, there are a few questions that we ask to help you set your profile up. But after that, you'll kind of log in the way you're seeing here. Okay, so I'm just going to jump around to show you Insights and how it works. You can research an individual college, but I would go to Power Search. And let me show you how you can search this. Again, you can pick individual colleges. You can pick as many as you want, and they will show up here. You can search by particular major. Again, if your student has a major that they're really particular about, I find that actually most students are still like interested in the general majors, which most colleges have, but you can filter by major. You can also filter by region. So the top regions here are the way that the government clumps colleges together geographically. So Far West, Great Lakes, and then in addition, you can pick individual states. So you could pick any combination of a region plus any number of states. Going back to the comment about cast a wide net, I'm not going to pick any of these criteria yet because maybe I'm a family that's really concerned about cost. On the left here, you can continue to filter by cost of attendance. So if there's a particular range that you want to be in, like so maybe I'm looking at private schools and I don't want the cost of attendance, I want it to be somewhere between 30,000 and 50,000. So automatically, the results show up, and then you can sort the results. So I'm going to sort by private cost of attendance. And now I can see, because my max was 50,000, these are colleges that have a cost of attendance of 50,000 and lower to 30,000. So that's one way you can use it. Sorry, let me just clear. You can also search by average merit award. So you can, you can pick a range. I want to find a school that's going to offer merit between 30 and, 60,000. You can also search by the net cost. So we do the calculation. If a college is offering merit, so we'll do the calculation and subtract the average merit from the cost of attendance. And you can sort that way. Somebody's asking, is cost of attendance just tuition, room, and board as well? Yes. Cost of attendance is tuition, room, and board, and there's other, sometimes additional expenses. If you go to a college's website, they'll show you everything that's included, but there's also the government defines what you can include in the cost of attendance, but the three things that make up the bulk of it are tuition, room, and board. There could be additional expenses for supplies, activities, and travel, but that's the bulk of it. Okay, so what I like to do is most colleges are giving money to that better or that stronger academic student, and they're defining a stronger academic student, whether we like it or not, based on their test scores. They talk about GPA, but as you're going to see from the data standpoint, not as many colleges share their GPA information as colleges share their test scores. So even though majority of colleges are test optional, I still search by test score. And if your student hasn't taken a test, I would take their GPA and convert it to a test score. So there's a lot of websites, particularly Prep Scholar has a chart. So if you Google GPA convert to SAT, you'll get usually probably Prep Scholar's chart, and it will show you a GPA and what the estimated test result would be with that student GPA. So that's one way if your student doesn't have a test score. But let's just put in an SAT of between 1,200 to 1,400. And you can search by filtering and saying, show me the schools where that 1,200 to 1,400 matches the average SAT. Or you can search by saying, show me the schools where this 1,200 to 1,400 average matches the 75th percentile. The 75th percentile are the strongest students, the students with the highest scores, and the schools that have that range. So I want to find the schools where this range is their top range, because those are the schools that they're going to give students in that top range merit. Okay, so now and that's all I've done. So this is kind of related to that cast a wide net, don't put too many filters on yet. So now I have a list of schools where their 75th percentile is the 1,200 to 1,400 SAT. And now I'm going to sort it by average merit. So I want to see which of those schools, how much merit do they offer? And if my student, has that 1,200 to 1,400, test score, and I might have to narrow it as I'm looking at these colleges' details, I can feel pretty certain that if my student applied to Beloit, as an example, they would probably get an average merit of 41,000. And now I can start to estimate what the cost is of each college on my student's list. So if my student went to Beloit and they got in and they had test scores in that range, there's a pretty good chance that they would probably be offered this 41,000. And so Beloit doesn't cost 67,000. It really costs, somewhere in the 20s. And let's just click in a little bit further at Beloit. The crowdsource offers is this information. So here's where you can look at actual offers that families shared. And you're going to want to look in the category of the SAI that's closest to you. Most families that are being offered merit are families that have an SAI of over 60,000 because they aren't qualified for any need-based aid. So it just gives you an idea. These are just some examples. This student got 40,000. They had a GPA of 3.61. If they didn't list their ACT or SAT, it meant that they did not submit it to the school. So this student applied test optional, and they still got money. You can see in offer 7 and 8, this student had a very high dollar amount of 1,540. I'm sorry, at high SAT. They got slightly more merit. They were from Maryland. So you can start to kind of see this isn't these aren't guarantees. These aren't, you can't make precise predictions from this, but you get a general trend of the type of student that actually does get merit. And you can go back a few different years. It's probably worth going back 2 or 3 years to see a similar trend. Last year, students got, again, in that 40,000 range. And what's interesting here is they had slightly lower, which is interesting, GPAs, but they had slightly lower, slightly lower test scores and slightly lower GPAs. So it just gives you a sense of what the colleges are offering and what type of student is getting that type of money. So let me show you one other thing. Once you've saved colleges to a list, you can pull up your list and you get more data. So let me just refresh this. Okay, I don't know why that's not coming up. Let's try another one. Okay, so once you create a list, now you get it in table formats. And what I like about this is that you can add in more data to see in just that table format. I personally find it a little easier to look at. So there's different sections of data, depending on if you feel too overwhelmed, you can just look at one section at a time. I tend to add all of them together. Okay, and now you have all the data that we give you access to, and I'll just kind of quickly go through what some of it is. It's the average GPA, whether or not a school is offering a co-op. You can get a link directly to the website. This is a link to the crowdsourced offers that I showed you, the average endowment per school, breakout of women versus men, the 4-year graduation rate. It's kind of wild, but that is not an easy stat to find because the government only mandates that colleges share the 6-year graduation rate. So if you go to most websites, it only has 6-year graduation rate, but you want to, I think we all want to know what the 4-year graduation rate, because we want our student out in 4 years, not 6. There's different breakout by ethnicity. I got to be honest, I'm not quite sure if that's going to continue going forward because of the rulings by the Supreme Court, but we'll see if that information is shared this year. And then we have breakout of GPA by the different GPA ranges. So you can see the dash means that the college is just not sharing that information. So that's why, unfortunately, searching by GPA doesn't give you as much information as searching by SAT. And then you have the average SAT, the 75th percentile, which is the column that you're going to find most important for ACT, SAT. And then let me just show you some other stats that I like to look at. We break out, there's the overall admit rate, right? But the overall admit rate is made up of other pieces. It's made up of if a school offers early decision or early action, what percentage of students were accepted early decision or early action. And then what's also important to look at is what percent of the class was admitted early decision. So let's see. Okay, so I just sorted, and you can sort any of these columns, ascending or descending. So here's an example, Davidson College. Their overall admit rate is 17%. Their early decision rate is 43%. So that obviously tells you something right there. If your student really wants to go to that college, they probably might be better off applying early decision. They have a better chance. The reason why the other piece of information to look at is that Davidson is taking 64% of their class early decision. So that means by the time if your student didn't apply your early decision, if they're applying regular decision, they are competing for a much smaller number of spots, and usually regular decision has more applications. So the number of students applying during regular decision is larger, and they're all competing for a smaller number of spots at this particular school, at Davidson. So that's why it's just important to understand that ahead of time, so that, again, your student, you can kind of make a strategy about which schools, if there are schools that they want to apply to, they can only pick one early decision. So is there an early decision school? I highly recommend, if a school offers early action, that absolutely your student should apply early action by that deadline. There is no downside. Early action has no commitment. The only commitment is that the college is going to tell you earlier that whether or not your student got in, rejected, or deferred. Some schools are sometimes deferring a lot of the students' early action. But the advantage is your student knows earlier. They've also been pushed to finish up their applications earlier. and you're just, taking advantage of, if there is any advantage of applying early decision or early action, your student is going to be there. So it's important to understand these numbers and factor them into your decisions about which school your student is going to apply to and when your student is going to apply to that school. So look at Washington, St. Louis, same thing going on. Their overall admit rate is 11%. Early decision, they took 27%. So, but they're filling 62% of their class early decision. So if a college is using early decision, it's really important to know how many of the seats are they committing with early decision candidates. Okay, so that's important information to look at. Let me continue scrolling. Oops, sorry. We have the deadlines in here. And then we have the average need-based aid. If you're a family that does have financial need, then this column, percent of need met, is going to be important for you. Going back to my comment earlier where I said, usually a school, if they're offering need-based aid, they're not offering merit. You can see that here. Johns Hopkins is offering need-based aid. In fact, they meet 100% of whatever a family's need is. So going back to some of the examples where I had, where maybe this family, if you have an SAI of 30,000, my guess is at Johns Hopkins, then your financial need is probably going to be 60,000. They say that they will meet and give you financial need that covers that full 60,000. So if your families with financial need, it's important to find these schools that are generous with need-based aid. And then for families that don't get financial need, you want to find the colleges that are generous with merit scholarships. Let me sort this column. This column that says average merit award is the merit scholarship money we're talking about. So look, before I sort this, let me just look at Johns Hopkins. So Johns Hopkins does give some merit. They give 40,000, which is a very nice amount, but they're only giving it to 10% of the students who don't have financial need. So it's important, you want to kind of look at both of these columns. How much money is the college offering in merit scholarships, and what percentage of the students are being offered the merit scholarship money? So let's, okay, I just did a sort by highest to lowest on average merit. So here's important. So Duke, they give merit, but they're giving it to 3% of the students. And in Duke's case, my guess is what's happening is they have competitive merit scholarships. I know this because we worked with a student last year. So after she applied, she was then asked to apply to an additional scholarship. She actually, no, she didn't get that scholarship. She got it at Emory, but there was an additional application, an essay to write. So they're giving very generous merit, but they're only giving it to a very select number of students. Here's the opposite, Webb Institute. And I know someone's going to ask, why is that number over 100%? And I'll answer that in a second. Webb is giving generous merit, and they're giving it to every student who does not have financial need. This kind of goes back to the very beginning of the presentation. Is this a scholarship or is this a discount? It's, I guess, a little bit of both, because they're only giving it to families that don't have financial need, but they're kind of giving it to every student. So it's really more of a discount as opposed to a scholarship. But, Webb Institute is still a decent school to consider if it meets some of the other criteria. So at least you understand what's going on in terms of how they're offering their money. So let me answer the question, why is this number over 100%? We do these calculations, and the raw data comes from the colleges themselves. So all of this information is self-reported raw data that the colleges share in their common data set, or that the colleges share to the government. In both of those processes of the common data set or to the government, there is no additional process that validates or verifies their information. That's just the way this goes right now. Again, there's so many things I wish would happen with this process, but it doesn't. So most of the data is good, but once in a while you find this 117%. And my guess is that somebody entered in a slightly incorrect number. I know for a fact that, like, Webb Institute gives 100% of their students without need merit. So this was probably a data entry mistake by somebody, from the college, but we can only work with the data that we're given because we have, as you could see, almost 4,000 colleges. And so we just do the calculations however they end up. If you question a number, which you should, then, if this was really important, I would reach out to Webb and I would say, just want to check. I mean, in this case, the number is likely 100%. But in another case where the numbers just seem strange, you can definitely email us and you can definitely reach out to the colleges. So I hope this was helpful. I'm going to now kind of switch over and look at some of the questions, but I understand I went past the hour. And if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out. You can send me an email at support@road2college.com. I'm assuming that a lot of people here are members of the Paying for College 101 Facebook group. I would also suggest that you go there. You can ask questions there, obviously. We added a hashtag recently. I think it's hashtag class 2024 results. And people are sharing their students' results with that hashtag. And I always find it fascinating because people give a lot of good detail. They will say all the schools the student applied to. They will, obviously give you their stats. They will say which schools they got in, which schools they were denied, which schools they got merit money from. And I just think it's really helpful and valuable to see it directly from the families. And then if, maybe there's a school on that list that your student is interested, you can ask that parent, questions about the process. Thank you. Somebody said, why wouldn't everybody use the website? It's very thorough. I appreciate it. We try our hardest to keep things up to date. I mean, it is up to date. In fact, we're working on a newer version of this website. It honestly won't be out until the fall, but to make even the searching and the table manipulation easier for everyone. So we're always trying to improve it. What's the Facebook page again? This is a Facebook group, Paying for College 101 Facebook group. Okay, let's go back. Any other questions? Financial need determined by SII. Some places, oh yes. Some places use a form called the CSS profile. And so I had a little caveat, which I didn't go into detail about when I said your SAI stays the same at all colleges. If the college is using only the FAFSA form, then your SAI will be the same at all of those colleges. If the college is using the CSS profile, and the colleges that tend to use the CSS profile are the more selective colleges that have a lot of money that they're giving out. The CSS profile has more detailed questions in the FAFSA, and the colleges do their own calculation of what their version of an SAI is for their school. So technically, if a college is using, so the FAFSA and the SAI number tells the government if you're eligible for Pell grants. And then if a college is using the FAFSA for their financial aid process, then they are also using the SAI to determine if you have need. Other colleges who use the CSS profile are only using the FAFSA to say, does that student, is that student eligible for need? But if they're using the CSS profile, then they're using the number that the CSS profile calculates as their number to determine if a student has need-based need or not. The CSS profile isn't really used for merit at all. It's used to determine whether what your SAI equivalent is for from the CSS profile and whether or not that school is going to offer you need. It's unfortunately another complicated process because schools don't share their calculation on the CSS's profile. They also never end up telling you what that number is. Sometimes they tell you at the end of the process, but the best way for those schools is to use their net price calculators. The schools that are using the CSS profile tend to be more selective, tend to have a lot of endowment money, and they also their net price calculators tend to be the most accurate. So that's my advice, is to definitely use the net price calculators. You can also use the net price calculators to kind of fool around with the numbers, meaning if the net price calculating is asking for your student's GPA or test score, give it, and then kind of see, well, what if my student got a higher test score? Like, run the net price calculator at different data points. So increase the test score and see, did that school offer your student more money? Increase the GPA. Did that make a difference? You can fool around with what your income level is if you think that you can make adjustments to your income. So you can run the net price calculator multiple times and see what the different outcomes are based on the data that you put into it. Is financial need just the amount families decide they need to fill the gap, or is there a calculation across the board to determine which families are in need? So the calculation has to do with the FAFSA, which I've been explaining, and it's your SAI is what's going to determine whether you have need, and it's going to be at a school by school case, whether or not if you have need and what your actual need amount is. What's the difference between early decision and early action? I think somebody answered it, but I'll just describe it quickly. It's really about the commitment. If your student applies early decision and they can only apply to one school early decision, if they get in, they're committing and saying, I'm going to withdraw my applications from every other school. Early action, there's no commitment. It's just that they get in their application earlier and the college tells them whether or not they're accepted, denied, or deferred earlier. There's a small set of schools. They're the more elite, really elite schools like Yale, Princeton, Harvard, that if you're going to apply, they call it restricted early action, then there are other requirements that you can't apply to other schools' early decision or other schools' early action. If your student is looking at those levels of schools, I'm sure make sure you understand the details about what the restrictions are if they're applying early action to those schools. Is an early decision a contractual commitment without knowing if you will get merit? Our counsel recommended against early decision versus early action. There is a risk. Yes, it is a contractual commitment. There is a risk in early decision because you don't know for sure what your dollar amount is that the college is going to cost you. Again, I tend to see that colleges that offer early decision have more accurate net price calculators. And this is not to push anybody towards applying early decision. If your student applies regular decision or early action, you absolutely do have a range of offers that you can be comparing against, and then you can actually be appealing for more money at a later point. So that's the trade-off between early decision versus early action. Early decision in most schools, if your student is, when I say that there's better chances, if your student just isn't of the right profile for that school and they're applying early decision because they heard, oh, it's easier to get an early decision, it's not going to be easier for them. It's not, getting into 1080 schools isn't easy these days anymore. Maybe your odds are better early decision, but you still have to be a strong student for that college. So I just want to emphasize that. I don't want people or a student to think, well, I really want to shoot for the stars, so I'm just going to apply to that rich school early decision. You still have to be a good candidate. You still have to be in the realm of a strong student that the school is going to look at and think that your profile and application is attractive. Good question. Is the GPA in the table weighted or unweighted? It is unweighted. So I'm glad you asked that. I hear ED is inflated due to recruited athletes and alumni. Potentially. So what this person is saying is that in the admissions process, if a school recruits a lot of athletes, then athletes are asked to apply early decision, and that's when a majority of athletes are accepted. If a school offers legacy admissions, meaning where they give a preference to a student that comes from a family where one of the parents went to that school, they are usually asked to apply early decision as well. So yes, the numbers could be a little bit inflated, because meaning that of the early decision seats, some of them are going to be used for athletes, some of them are going to be used for alumni, and then the rest are going to be used for everybody else. I think, you know, that again tends to happen at the really elite schools, you know, Harvard, Princeton, but it also depends on how many athletes they're accepting. And then again, that's why it's important to look at what percentage of the class is taken early decision. If you see a school that's offering early decision and they take like 30% of the class early decision, and it's a school that recruits a lot of athletes, then yes, then the majority of that early decision seats are probably going to be given to athletes, and the college isn't using that many seats for early decision. But again, that's why it's important to kind of look at all these numbers. Is there any way to find data on if colleges offer merit after a gap year? That's a great question. I wish there was. I have never seen that. I don't think that they are going to offer a different amount of merit, because you're well, maybe I'm not sure the question, how I'm reading the question. In the case, if your student has been accepted to a school and they have deferred, or they have said, I want to take a gap year, they basically committed to the school, and usually the school is going to offer what if the school offered merit during that process, they're going to offer the same amount of merit when your student decides to come. There could be another way of interpreting the question about gap years. Some students take a gap year and then reapply after their gap year. If your student is reapplying, I think the fact that they took a gap year is going to be helpful to their application and their admissions, but it's not going to have any impact on merit. Does a student need to create a free account on Insights, or can a parent share it with them? Actually, you can have one account on Insights for the family. You guys can all share the logins. I had one person who created their account with their Google login, and then they couldn't share it with their family. Actually, if that happens, just a little trick, you can create an account that has that lets you log in with Google and with an email password. Just create your first account with your Google login, and then create a second account with the same Gmail address as, I say Google, I meant Gmail, a Gmail login or Google login, and use the same Gmail address as the Google login, and then the two accounts will be linked together. So that way you can log in either way. Do you think colleges look at SAI when deciding merit? I feel like they adjust how much merit based on how much parents can afford. That's a great question, and they do. I actually skipped a slide in the presentation just for time purposes. There are some schools that, well, there's a set of schools called need blind. Need blind schools don't look at any of your finances when they make decisions. Again, that's a small set of schools. They tend to be the most selective schools. Majority of schools are what they call need aware, and they are looking at how much you can afford, and it does impact potentially how much merit they're going to offer. From a college's perspective, the ideal student, right, is the student who's strong academically and is in the top 75th percentile of that for that particular college, and the family can afford and has to send that student to school there, and they have a high SAI. And the reason why that's most attractive to the college is because they're going to offer that student merit. The student might not need as much merit to convince them to come because it looks like their family can already afford it. And so from a college's perspective, if they have a limited amount of money, and I'll just give an example. Let's say you had $40,000, right? Wouldn't I rather use my $40,000 and offer 4 students a scholarship of $10,000 each to get them to the school? And if those 4 students accepted, I would have enrollment or tuition dollars from all 4 students. as opposed to offering one scholarship of $40,000 to one family who has that need. So in one example, I got 4 families to come to a college. I got more what they call total tuition dollars from that $40,000 versus using that $40,000 as one lump sum amount to one family. So to your question about do families look at the SAI when deciding merit, I would say yes, but it's not an absolute. So they are definitely looking at your students' stats, and then they are probably making a decision that we might give a little bit, we might give some money to this family because they know that they can afford the full amount versus they might give a little less to another family. So, and I've absolutely seen this where a strong student applied to a particular college, and the family reached out and said, how come they didn't get more merit? And they weren't a full need family, sorry, full pay family. So they, in that case, the college was probably looking at how much that family could pay towards college, and they were probably prioritizing their scholarships money towards a family that they knew could afford the college more because they wanted to attract that family and more than they wanted to attract the family that they weren't sure if they could truly afford it. It's horrible to explain this, but I think it is a process that happens. Do you feel that most of the GPAs stated are weighted or unweighted? I think most of them are unweighted. Does this tool consider automatic merit versus competitive? We don't have an indicator for that. Quite honestly, there's just so many colleges that offer merit, and we don't have the resources to dig through their websites to know which is automatic versus competitive. But if you know that the college offers merit and then you start doing the research on their website, you'll have a better idea. You not have better, you'll know exactly. We actually do have a link that links you to the page on the college's website with their merit scholarship details. So that just helps, again, to make the process a little bit faster. Okay, so I think I went through a lot of the questions. I'll kind of scan these through after. It's 1:30. Hopefully this was helpful to everyone. And as always, feel free to reach out with questions, but this is the time to research. And somebody said, can we re-watch this? Yes, we will be sending a link. Today's only Tuesday. I'm thinking that today's Friday because of but yeah, so the link will go out tomorrow, and you'll get an email with the link. You can rewatch this as many times as you want. Okay, everybody, thank you, and good luck, and reach out with questions. Bye, and happy 4th of July.